Hi. Official recaps here.
A fresh crew of 8 is sent out in the Icarus II to try again 7 years later, during Earth's solar winter. First, there's Searle, the psychological officer and ship doctor, who has developed a sun-watching obsession. He even requests that the observation room panel be refiltered by the Icarus AI so that he can see as much brightness as possible without getting burned. He finds the whole crew: the engineer James Mace, the pilot Cassie, the biologist Corazon, the communications officer and second-in-command Harvey, the ship's captain Kanita, the navigator Trey, and the physicist in charge of the bomb Robert Kappa, to be so amazing that he suggests doing it to them all over dinner. However, the concept doesn't appeal to any of them. The crew should send home their final messages because Kanita tells them that the solar wind reading is significantly higher than they had predicted at this distance and that they will soon enter the dead zone, which will prevent them from communicating with Earth. Kappa records a video message for his sister and parents, informing them that they will know if they are successful if the sun comes out by the time they receive it. Kappa cannot get in touch with him at this time. Nevertheless, he takes so long to record this that his crewmates are left with no time to do the same, which infuriates Mace, who attempts to pick a fight with him. Once the others have separated them, Mace is sent to speak with Searle, who informs him that he has lost track of time and gives him a 2-hour prescription to spend in the Earth room, a room designed to mimic their home in order to help them relax. Kanita, in the meantime, keeps watching the archived reports that Icarus I Captain Pinbacker sent. Kanita is still concerned even after Corazon reassures him that her garden is producing plenty of oxygen and that the previous crew's issue wasn't with it. This is especially true when he witnesses Pinbacker characterizing some damage his ship sustained as beautiful. Cassie realizes they are going to pass Mercury, so the whole crew heads to the observation room to watch it. It's a welcome diversion, though. A while later, Harvey discovers something significant while examining the communication systems. A broadcast playing the Icarus I's distress signal, which is getting to them because the ship has reached Mercury's dark side and the iron content of the planet is functioning as an antenna. The first ship's trajectory is simulated by Icarus on the screen, and they discover that no one has detected the signal up to this point, since it was obscured by background light and noise ever since the Icarus actually made it quite close to the sun. The crew begins debating whether or not it would be wise to change course and approach the Icarus I. Mace doesn't think it's a good idea because everything will perish if they fail to deliver their payload, and the mission is more important. However, there might be survivors inside the ship, along with extra food and oxygen that they can use. Most importantly, though, might be an extra bomb that will increase their chances of setting the sun on fire again. They can't agree on whether the risk is worthwhile, so they let Kappa make the call because he is knowledgeable about physics and can determine what is best. He calculates with Icarus whether the extra bomb is worth the risk and orders them to fly in the direction of Icarus I. After Trey modifies their course, the ship leaves Mercury's orbit. However, he makes a mistake. He neglects to realign the shields shielding the ship from the sun, resulting in damage to 4 panels that, if left unfixed, could destroy the entire ship and kill the crew. With Cassie guiding them, Kanita and Kappa go on a spacewalk to repair the damaged portion of the shield away from the sun, which results in the loss of 2 protruding communications towers that are currently inoperable. However, this also causes the reflected light to destroy the ship's oxygen garden and oxygen reserves to Corazon's dismay, who has to watch how O2 is released to put out the fire. They need to re-angle the shield, but this would kill Kappa and Kanita, who are still not done with the repairs. Harvey and Cassie want to wait, but Mace reminds them that the priority is to protect the payload and Kanita agrees with him. So as Icarus uses autopilot to fix the ship's rotation, Kanita sends Kappa back inside and sacrifices himself to fix the last panel. Moments later, Searle needs to sedate Trey, putting him in a catatonic state, because the guilt is putting him at suicide risk. As the second-in-command, Harvey becomes the new captain, and he informs the crew that after what happened to the garden, they don't have enough oxygen to get them to their delivery point, let alone survive the journey, so now they have no other choice but to try to make contact with the Icarus I and hope they can salvage enough to continue the journey. After everyone else goes to take care of their chores, Mace, Corazon, and Cassie have a chat in private, where Corazon tells them that their current oxygen levels would be enough if they lose 3 people. Afterward, Cassie shares a little talk with Kappa, telling him she is scared of dying, but he admits he is not. Once Icarus II finally docks with Icarus I, Kappa, Searle, Mace, and Harvey go aboard to search the ship. Ignoring the fact lights don't work and the ship is full of dust, which most likely is human skin, they decide to split the group to search more effectively. While Searle checks for food and water and finds plenty of both, Trey confirms the second bomb is fully operational, and Harvey discovers the garden intact after 7 years of unrestrained growth, much to Corazon's delight. Mace finds that everything is working well as well, with the exception that he isn't receiving any information from the flight computer. As he looks further into the files, a recording featuring a wordy message from Pinbacker begins to play. With a burned face, he says they've given up on the mission because they shouldn't disobey God. The transmission code dates back to precisely the period when they were meant to deliver the payload. 6.5 years ago, Mace keeps on searching for an explanation and finds out the mainframe has been sabotaged, so they can't fly the Icarus I, officially making this detour completely pointless. Cyril eventually locates the crew when he enters the observation room and discovers that everyone has died and is sitting in front of the panel after allowing the sun to burn them to ashes. Abruptly, the two vessels violently separate, demolishing the outer airlock of Icarus I and leaving the 4 men stranded as the Icarus II begins to drift away. As there is only one suit that will work, Mace and Cyril decide to give it to Kappa, who has the upper hand because he is the only one who is familiar with using the payload. Harvey objects, arguing that as the captain he ought to have precedence, but the others disobey his directives. But Mace has one more idea that might save the others. He takes insulation material from the ship's walls and wraps it around himself. This should be sufficient to keep them warm as they jump from one ship to another. The only issue is that one of them needs to stay behind to open the hatch because the computer isn't functioning anymore, and Cyril agrees to give his life to do it. When Cassie lines up the 2 airlocks, Cyril opens the airlock, and the 3 men jump between ships while clinging to each other by using the vacuum release as propulsion. But when they unintentionally hit the ship while leaving, they are forced to let go, and only Kappa makes it to the other airlock. Harvey floats away and freezes, asphyxiating to death, but Mace is able to cling to a handrail, which allows Kappa to grab him and drag him inside. Returning to Icarus I, Cyril accepts his fate and uses the communications to bid Cassie's farewell before sitting next to the bodies in the observation room to let the sun burn him. Upon examining the activity file 3 times, Mace is certain that neither Icarus nor any malfunction occurred, indicating that the airlocks were disconnected manually. Trey is the sole surviving option because the men and women were together in Icarus I and II, respectively. Trey is so profoundly unconscious that it is nearly impossible for him to move sufficiently to pull off such a feat, which is why Kappa is dubious. Corazon adds that since they have already lost 2 breathers, they only need to lose 1 more to complete the mission, and Mace agrees to be the one to kill Trey. Although Kappa believes that Icarus I may have fallen victim to this madness, he nevertheless approves of the action because it will benefit humanity in the long run. Corazon concurs as well, but Cassie doesn't, which isn't really important because Mace leaves the crew and heads into the infirmary because it's 3 against 1. Mace checks the bed after grabbing an electric scalpel, but Trey isn't there. As a matter of fact, he has already cut his own wrists and is dead, sitting in the Earth room. When the other members of the crew arrive, Mace accuses them of being responsible for the deaths because Kappa decided to change the mission's course, claiming that the blood that was spilled should have been his. Enraged, Kappa tackles him and they engage in a brief struggle as their breathing becomes difficult due to the low oxygen levels. Kappa asks Icarus to check the crew's oxygen consumption and biometrics while he checks on the payload. Icarus tells Kappa that there is not enough oxygen, and they will all perish before the payload is delivered. Icarus informs Kappa there is a 5th unidentified person on board who is presently standing in the observation room when he becomes confused and states the oxygen that should be left over should be sufficient for the 4 of them. When Kappa arrives, the viewing panel is gleaming with sunlight, and there in front of it stands a deranged pinbacker who is talking non-stop about God, angels, people, and stardust. He was the one who uncoupled the airlocks. He attacks Kappa abruptly and uses one of the electric scalpels to cut his stomach before he runs out and asks Icarus to switch the panel to full sunlight. This isn't enough to kill him, so he chases after Kappa until he enters the airlock and closes the hatch behind him. Pinbacker takes the chance to lock the door manually to stop Kappa from escaping before going to the coolant tank to remove the panels, which causes Icarus to shut down. Meanwhile, Corazon is staring at her burned garden when she notices a tiny little baby plant among the debris. She intends to tell the rest of the crew about it, but Pinbacker finds her and kills her by stabbing her with the scalpel. Back in the airlock, Kappa puts on the vest from one of the suits in an attempt to stop the bleeding and notices he cannot open the door as the power goes out in the entire ship. Cassie, who had been sleeping, also notices the lack of power and goes out to investigate with a flashlight in hand. When she finds Pinbacker, she runs out of there as fast as possible. In the control room, Mace reactivates the computer with an emergency battery, but Icarus won't answer. He sees Kappa on the security cameras and tells him to use the communicator on the suit helmet, so now Kappa can tell him about Pinbacker and his sabotaging. As soon as he hears this, Mace rushes to the coolant tank and submerges himself in the freezing water to reinstall the panels Pinbacker took out, managing to bring back power right before Pinbacker catches up with Cassie at the Earth room and tries to attack her. Cassie uses the scalpel Trey had used to stab Pinbacker, but fortunately for her, he is distracted by the shadows and grabs Trey instead. Cassie then flees again and hides in the room with the bomb. Mace manages to get in touch with Kappa while his body slowly freezes to death due to his leg becoming stuck in the coolant tank. He informs Kappa that they are in orbit but that he may not be able to restart the computer, so he will have to manually detonate the payload after removing it from the ship. As Mace begs Kappa to complete the mission, he passes away. Kappa dons the astronaut suit and uses a torch to pierce the door leading to the hallway. After tying himself to the wall, he unscrews the cover covering the emergency button and pushes it. As a result, the main hatch is forced open, and the hallway door blows up, allowing Kappa to re-enter the ship due to an outside pressure and a hole in the metal. He proceeds to the control room, where he triggers the bomb room's separation process after noticing Mace's frozen corpse, and he leaps from the ship into it as the sun burns Icarus II away. He removes the suit inside the bomb and approaches Cassie, who is sitting on the floor staring at nothing in particular. Before he can even speak to her, Pinbacker ambushes them, snatching Kappa by the throat and dragging him over the edge of the bomb so that he can fall into the chasm while babbling about the sun as though it were his god. At that moment, Cassie loses his mind and rushes to assist Kappa, tearing the skin off one of his arms in the process. Now that the bomb is finally entering the sun, Cassie orders Kappa to finish it after she gets thrown around a little from the shaking. Kappa rushes to the controls and activates the payload as he notices Pinbacker waiting for him by the edge of the bomb, but he chooses to ignore him and focus on the mission. The bomb explodes and Kappa watches how the sun is reignited, even reaching out to it before dying. Back on Earth, Kappa's sister watches his message one more time before taking her kids to watch the sunrise for the first time in years.
If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.